There's a talent drain happening in college football. Let's talk about it.
The transfer portal and NIL are always in the news. So we're back on the Big Mountain, where we bring you a detailed focus on the Big Ten and the Mountain West.
Hey, it's good to have you here. I am JY. This is my good friend Steve. Steve, I want to do something a little bit different here. I want to talk about specifically the transfer portal and what it means for G5 programs and P5 programs. Now, I want to be careful because here on the mountain, we have now determined it is a P2, which would be the Big Ten and the SEC moving into next year, and an other 8.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to call it a P5 and a G5 right now just because that's what people are used to. And that's kind of what we're talking about right now. But to be very, very clear, we think, Steve and I think, that we're moving to a P2 and an other 8 type of situation right now. There was an article that both of us read that I found really, really interesting. And I thought it was enough to at least bring it up on one of our podcasts here. I want to get your opinions on this. I'm going to lay out a little bit of the groundwork here in terms of what the article said. But I want to talk through this here a little bit. The article was referring to the G5 and the P5 and transfers from G5 schools and athletes from G5 schools going to P5 schools. Last week, we saw the Conference USA release their all-conference team. 17 of those players have already entered the transfer portal. Now, you'll know that I'm not huge into Conference USA. I personally think that Conference USA is one of the bottom other 8 conferences. But irregardless, as that may be, I want to talk about how there are these other 8 conferences players that are looking to move up into what we're going to be calling the P2. During this last cycle, nearly 600 scholarship players from G5 programs, and this was astonishing to me, 600 players from G5 programs have put their names into the portal. P5 programs have a bit of a risk here in terms of, are they going to go with G5 starters? Are they going to go with P5 backups? And they got to make that determination. Okay, you're a G5 starter versus a P5 backup. What exactly does that mean? Who are you going to put more weight on, I guess, in terms of that? In 22-23, 239 group of 5 players signed 2 P5 programs. That's astonishing to me. That's a lot of players. However, the ones that did make that, and the ones that become starters draw all the attention. Yes. Oh, I came from a group of 5 and I'm now a P5. But let's talk about everybody else, because among the 186 transfers, 72%, so that's almost 3/4, 72% played less snaps on the P5 programs than they did in the G5 program, and 37% have not started a game in that P5 school. Now, we've been talking this is going to become a P2 school, but that's really seeing a lot of these players that are getting a lot of time in the group of 5 programs move to a Power 5 program to which they may not even see snaps at all. Yep. Again, as I said, 37% have not started a game. Now, have they seen snaps? Yes, but they haven't started a game in the Power 5. I also want to bring up, what does this mean for high school? Yeah. Because we're seeing this trickle down. Programs that used to sign 25-ish high school players are now signing 15 to 20 high school players because they're saving those spots for potential transfers from other schools. Now, I'm going to fill that in with group of 5 schools, but it could be from any school, quite frankly. I did see a very interesting article that had a Dabo Sweetie comments on this and specific to high school transfer or high school signings. And his statements were, I think it's sad to see what's going on in high school recruiting. There's a lot of high school kids not getting signed anymore. And to him, that's really sad. And to me, that's really sad. Like, it's moving from signing these high school players, trying to bring them up through your program and create starters out of them, or at least maybe not even starters, create players that are going to be able to play for your program, and you're not really seeing that anymore. They're leaving some of these holes or leaving some of these openings for the transfer portal. So a dramatic shift in what we've seen here over the past few years since we've gotten into this transfer portal situation, both for high school players and for group of 5 players. You know, Steve, I want to hear what you have to say. I kind of laid this out. I found this article really interesting in terms of this drain, if you will, or pool, if you will, from group of 5 and what we're going to be calling the other 8 conferences to this Power 2 conference. You know, what are you thinking about this? Because I found this article really interesting.
Yes, I did as well. You know, we'd seen it pop up on The Athletic. We were looking at that, and it got us kind of talking and looking at a whole bunch of other stuff on this subject. So we want to do an episode on this just to kind of bring it all together. It's a great time of year to talk about stuff like this.
Yep.
So first of all, I want to say I think, you know, it's a great topic, and I think it's obvious that that's happening.
Yeah.
Mainly because we've basically, between the court cases and the NCAA and whatever, they've created an environment that is much more like a free market, okay?
Yep.
And anytime you have a free market, it creates more opportunities for the players, for the talent, for them to move. And in general, talent is going to move based on opportunity, and that could be monetary opportunity, that could be playing time, that could be whatever, that could be publicity. So that talent is moving, and they're moving you know, whether you look at it fortunately or unfortunately, they're moving from some of the smaller programs to some of the bigger programs, okay? And they're moving all over the place.
Yep.
So it's not surprising at all. It's obvious that it's happening. Now, you know, I like to be sometimes offer a counter opinion on things, be a little contrarian.
Yep.
So I have some counter opinions to what, you know, some of the things that were in the article. You know, they kind of portrayed it one way, and Dabo's quotes kind of went one way. So I have some just kind of counterpoints to some of those things that were brought up. So first of all, Dabo Swinney, you know, he was incredibly successful in that previous model where players had no chance to transfer, whatever. He was incredibly successful, and he hasn't been nearly as successful in the new model with transfer portal and all that. So there could be some, he's seeing it from a certain perspective because it's affecting his own personal situation, okay? Sure. And so then I also want to say, you know, there were players that would come to programs like Michigan or Penn State or Alabama or Ohio State or Clemson, and they would come there, they wanted to play football, they're getting a scholarship, whatever, and they don't get an opportunity to play.
Yep.
They sit there forever, they're on the bench or whatever. These rules give them yes, it gives those kids that are really talented from the lower programs an opportunity to move up, but also gives those opportunity, those bench players on the big programs to try and go either to other big programs or down to lower programs. We'll call them lower. They're just, this kind of the way it is as far as terms of money and resources. And gives them an opportunity to get playing time. They can, a lot of these kids can graduate in 3 years. So if you have 5 years of eligibility, if you can get your degree, you know, you go to a Michigan, you go to an Ohio State, you go to a Penn State, you go to a Clemson, get your degree, you give it your best shot. If you make the starting lineup, great. If not, you have your degree, and you have 2 years to go to another program to get an opportunity to play, get your master's degree. It's a great opportunity for players. It gives them upward, downward, lateral movement. Okay, so that's kind of my first pushback on what he was saying. As far as high school players, here's the thing: is there's the same total number of scholarships. Okay. Every Division I program has 85 scholarships, and so maybe on that national signing day in December of the kid's junior year in high school, not as many kids are getting signed at that point. But honestly, that's super early. There's the same amount of scholarships. There's the same amount of opportunities. So eventually, you're going to see that backfill. There might have been a kind of a correction at the beginning, and we're also operating in that COVID situation where players are getting 6 years of eligibility. Those players are going to start to cycle through. So this hasn't eliminated the total number of scholarships. It's just kind of changing the mix. But the same amount of players are going to get the same amount of opportunities because there's going to be very few programs. Yeah, they might save a scholarship instead of signing a player in December. They can still sign players in the spring, in the summer, whatever. So same amount of players are going to get an opportunity. My third, or did you have a comment on that part?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so my third comment is market corrections, okay? We talked about how this has basically created a free market. We've kind of seen the first 3 years of this market. Yep. There's always market corrections. Yep. You talked about players moving up and then they don't get to play.
Yeah.
That's going to work itself out. Anytime there's a free market, there's going to be market corrections. When a market goes a certain way, players are going to see, hey, I know these 5 guys, they all transferred and, none of them got to play at that other program. Maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I'd rather stay at Boise.
Yep.
And if I'm a Genty, maybe I'd rather stay at Boise, be the number 1 guy, have a possible Heisman Trophy campaign instead of going and fighting for a backup role at a Michigan or a USC or whatever.
Yep.
So I think you're going to see a market correction.
Yep.
Now, the fourth thing I want to say is I think this also gives an opportunity for some of those programs, and we've started to see it like with Kent State and some other programs, to be kind of developmental programs, okay? Where, hey, their pitch to these high school kids is, okay, you're not getting that attention from Ohio State, Penn State, Clemson, Alabama right now. Come here. You're really talented. You are more talented than the guys I got on the field.
Yeah.
You will see playing time day one, year one.
Yep.
Put together a great freshman and sophomore year. We have a plan. If you take summer classes, which you're going to be required to do, you can graduate in 3 years.
Yep.
You can play here, and then you're going to have 2 years of eligibility, potentially, to go to one of those big-time programs. And we have a track record. Last year, we sent these receivers to this program. They're now in the NFL.
Yep.
And they can sell themselves as a developmental program and maybe gain access to talent that normally wouldn't go there if they can create that pipeline. So, again, I think it's happening, and in some ways I hate to see it, but I think you can look at this as, when you look at it as a whole market, as more opportunities for players. The opportunities are just different than they were before.
Totally agree. And I think this is an opportune time just to say that, Steve and I talk about what we're going to talk about for an episode on very, very high level. Hey, we're going to talk about this. We don't talk about our opinions on it because we want it to be very natural. Conversational, and we may agree or we may disagree. And I would say most of the time we agree. Yep. And sometimes we disagree, especially with the Pac-12 and the OSUS, WSU. And I take a little bit more of a departing 10 side, if you will.
And I just like to be contrarian.
You just like to be a jerk, too. But that's okay. But honestly, like we just talk about topics, and Steve does his research and I do my research, and we kind of come at this, and you guys get our first take on this, and I think this is a great opportunity to talk about that. But I will say, Steve, I completely agree with you on this. I think a couple things. I think what we're seeing right now is kind of the peak of seeing G5 players move to P5 status. Yep. I think that is not going to be the case moving forward nearly as much as we're seeing now, because we're moving to a P2 to a other 8.
Right.
So there's going to be less opportunity to move up, if you will.
Totally
and I hate to say that, but that's kind of where we are now. You talked about the market. I completely agree with you on that. The other thing I will say is, it works both ways. This article really was focused on G5 moving up to P5, and I will say, for those that have heard us, 08 moving up to P2. But it works both ways. It also works with, as you said, the players that are on the bench are not getting a lot of playing time, and you're not going to get seen if you're not getting a lot of playing time. Right. You want to get your name out there. You want to be seen as a player, and yes, maybe you're playing for an 08 team, but at least you're playing.
Yes.
And I think it works both ways. So now I think I agree with you. I think you're seeing that pressure on the upward, if you will, trajectory of players trying to move themselves up into the P2. But I think that's very short term. I think that's a year or two. I think as this all plays itself out and people truly understand that we have a P2 and an 08, and there ain't nothing wrong with an 08 team.
Right.
You're going to have a lot more of that downward pressure because the players aren't getting the playing time that they think they should be getting. I mean, you look at an Alabama, you look at an OSU, or Ohio State, you look at a Michigan, they got some damn good players just sitting on the bench that could contribute mightily to an 08 program and really make a name for themselves. Again, we've talked about Genty in the past, and I want to focus on Genty. He is making a national name for himself at Boise State, as a significant running back that he probably would not have the opportunity to have at a Michigan right now.
Absolutely.
And he's a freaking sophomore.
Yes.
What other sophomore in the country has that name recognition as a Genty does? There's not many.
Nope.
So I think, I agree with you. The market will correct. I think we're seeing a lot of upward projection towards that P2 right now. It's gonna come back, and the players are gonna understand, if I want playing time and my goal is to move forward with the NFL or whatever it is, I need to be playing so people can see what opportunity, or what abilities that I have and the opportunities that I can gain. I honestly think the long-term game here is beneficial to the other 8. And that's not taking away from the top. I mean, clearly, the top players are going to be playing for the Power 2 conferences, but those second or third tier guys, they're going to have great opportunity at the other 8. I completely agree with you on this. Honestly, I think it makes for an overall better college football experience, because you've got these guys that typically in years past would be sitting on a bench and maybe getting some opportunity at a Michigan, now being a starter for a fill in the blank, Mountain West, Sun Belt, American, whatever it may be, and they're showing what they can do. I think it's a really good scenario for these players. And in the short term, it's a struggle. I don't think it's there yet, but it's not going to take long to get there. Right. I completely agree with you, Steve.
And that's the thing. So we focus on the Mountain West as our program formally of the G5. Okay.
Yes.
So that gives us examples. So and I love your example of Genty.
Yeah.
And the studio crew the other night in his bowl game, which I think was an ABC crew, who they don't cover him normally.
Right.
They don't see him. They were amazed by him, and they were basically saying, hey, towards the end of that game, they're like, this guy, he's staying with Boise. He is going to be a Heisman Trophy candidate next year.
Yes, I heard that as well.
He could be the most dynamic and exciting running back in the country next year, and he's going to be at Boise. Where if he went to Michigan and he went to Ohio State, he'd be fighting for carries. Yep. He may go into a situation. If he was at Michigan this year, he'd be the third running back and get 2-3 carries a game.
Yep.
So I think he's a great example. I think at Fresno, a Mikey Keene.
Yep.
Okay. Where. If he goes to a Power 2, a Big Ten program or whatever, fighting those quarterback rooms that have 5 stars coming in every year, he maybe gets a year or two. If he's the best of the best, he maybe gets 2 years as a starter.
Yep.
Okay, generally.
Yep.
The number one predictor of success for college quarterbacks making that transition to the NFL is how many games they started in college.
Yep.
So, for a quarterback who wants to go to the NFL, they're going to have to look. Do I want to go to a P2 program with a really crowded quarterback situation, or can I go to a Fresno? Can I go to a Wyoming? Can I go to a Boise and have possibly 4 years as a starter, get 40, 50, 60 starts under my belt, still be able to play on national television, showcase my talents? And so that'll be a big question. And I think that you will see, you're still going to see those real 5-star blue chip quarterbacks. They're going to want to go to Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama.
Right.
But those other guys that are just good, solid college quarterback prospects, I think they're going to have a decision to make. And I think programs like Boise and Fresno, and there's other, programs across the country that are not in the Power 2 that are, we've talked about SMU before, other programs where they can have an opportunity to go in there, be a starter for 4 years, get those starts under their belt. So, I think there's just a lot of this whole scenario makes a lot of opportunities for players.
I completely agree with you. And I think it's a short-term loss, if you will, for a very long-term game. You want to show your talents on the field. You don't want to assume what you're going to be. I mean, I kind of look back at the New England Patriots when Brady was the quarterback.
Yeah.
And their backup, and he's a great back. What was his name?
Well, they had a couple guys. They had Castle, and then they had the guy with
went
the
to San Francisco.
Yes,
yeah. Anyway, but he's a great quarterback, but he's not going to get playing time.
Right. Garoppolo.
Garoppolo, yes. So it's almost like that situation, right? Like, do you want to show your skills in college, or do you want to play backup? And at that point, nobody's going to draft you. on a hope because there's so many other knowns that they can draft on.
Right, and we're not in the 1980s anymore,
Yeah.
where you have to be at one of these blue blood programs to get on TV.
Right.
These other conferences, they're on prime time. Mountain West,
Yep.
had games on CBS Sportsnet, FS1, even Fox. Friday nights prime time, Saturday nights prime time. They're still with all of the media availabilities. They're still able to get on TV, national TV, showcase their talents. And they have opportunity where, again, they can choose between a place where they have to fight through a crowded quarterback room, or maybe go someplace where they can be the starter from day one.
Agreed, and is really as we move into this P2 era, is the bottom half of the P2 on any given year much different than the top 20 of the other 8 on any given year? And to me, I would say, no, they're not. I mean, if you can show what you can do on the field at that level, I think you're proving to the scouts and you're proving to the NFL, if that's where you're wanting to go, what you can do. And while it may in the short term look like all the talent's going to the P2, they can only house so much talent.
Right.
And if kids, if student athletes want to show what they can do, they're going to be going to that other 8. And that's where you can show what you can do. And you may be the number 2 on a Power 2, top half of a Power 2 team, where you're the starter on an other 8 team, and you prove your value at that level. And there you go. I mean, you look at the Monday Night Footballs when the guys, I assume they still do it, they come on and go,
say other school.
I'm from the Ohio State, or I'm from wherever you're from. And you look at the vast, just the plethora of different schools that these kids are coming from. Yes, there is the Power 2,
right,
but there's a lot of other kids that, student athletes that come from other schools. So the opportunity is what matters.
I'm going to go to the well one more time.
Yeah.
I know we've been beating Genty, beating like a dead horse. But so right now, okay, if he went in the transfer portal, which he said he's not, he's going back to Boise.
Yep.
He would be one of the most coveted running backs in the country.
Yeah.
So let's look at the Big Ten as an example. Okay, the conference I focus on. So I'll give you 3 programs. You have Ohio State, top tier. They have multiple 5-star running backs there, 4 and 5-star guys. You have to go in there and compete with them.
Yep.
You look at a Penn State, they got 2 4 or 5-star running backs. He'd have to compete with them.
Yep.
Even a Rutgers, okay? Rutgers actually has the returning, will have the returning conference leading rusher next year.
Yeah.
You go there and you're going to be in a 2-back situation.
Right.
Whereas next year he's set up to be the guy, be on prime time, be at Boise, put up crazy numbers, showcase his talents. So I think that's just a good example of, and maybe that doesn't work for other guys. Maybe there would be a situation where it'd be better for them to go to a Michigan or go to an Alabama or Ohio State. But for Genty and a lot of other players like him, I think that this situation is the best situation for him. And I think we'll see that a lot going forward.
Completely agree. And I'm going to use the opposite, because we've been talking about one way. Let's talk about McCord.
Okay.
Going from OSU and all that pressure at OSU. We now have heard he's going to be going to Syracuse.
Yeah.
And Syracuse is not a Big Ten school.
Right.
They don't have the pressure of a Big Ten school. But can he thrive at Syracuse? I would say yes.
Absolutely.
He probably can.
Yep.
And can he make a name for himself as a starting NFL quarterback at a Syracuse or any other hundreds of schools that you could name? Yeah, I think he can. So I almost think, and I appreciate this article. I'm not trying to throw shade at this article. I think it makes a very, very good point. And in the short term, I think that's where the pressure is, 100%. But I think in the long term, you're going to see, to what you said early on, Steve, you're going to see some of these kids say, it's not worth me sitting on a bench, only getting a few snaps a game. I want to go to a school. And I think the Kyle McCord is a perfect situation where you're seeing a kid that was at OSU, a top 5 school, I'll say 5.
He was I think he was number 1 quarterback in the country going to the one of the
he's going to Syracuse, which nothing against Syracuse. I mean, they're not a great.
They have a new coach coming from Georgia. There's a lot of positive things, but they're not a major.
But they're not a major.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what you're going to see a lot more of. And to the Genty situation, where is he going to get that name? Is he going to get that name from a very strong, probably the best Mountain West school next year?
Right.
and what they're going to be able to do and maybe make a name in the new college football playoffs.
Yes.
And what's the long term for him?
Absolutely.
That is way more long term, way smarter for a kid like that than a kid playing backup at an OSU or a Michigan or fill in the blank. Totally agree with you. I think it honestly opens more opportunities as we get past these first year or two of where we're at right now. More opportunities for the kids to show who they are.
Yeah, and I love your example of McCord.
Yeah.
You know, with him going to Syracuse, if he's going to go there, get another 12, 13, maybe 14 games as a starter under his belt in a lower pressure environment. And he was successful at Ohio State. He wasn't maybe at the same level as some of the guys who have come before him, but he was successful, came within a couple plays of an undefeated season, and possibly beating Michigan, going to the college football playoff. But it was getting death threats from Ohio State fans.
It's just crazy to me.
Absolutely
these
crazy.
are freaking student athletes.
Yes. So for him to go to this situation, it's a better situation for him.
Yes.
And he can develop, and he may actually end up as, if he goes there and he's successful and he develops, as a higher draft pick into the NFL.
Absolutely.
Than some of the really talented athletes that go to programs like an Ohio State. I could compare him. I know you don't like him as an NFL player, but Daniel Jones at Duke. Okay. Daniel Jones went there. I believe he was a 3 or 4 year starter at Duke. Kind of just was under the radar, was able to develop, and was a top NFL draft pick as a quarterback. And sometimes that environment is better for quarterbacks to develop. Maybe he doesn't have that high end opportunity of going to Ohio State, but it can be a better way for them to fully develop into what they're going to be, get those starts under their belt, and maybe a little lower pressure environment. Yes, there is definitely, I think people should be concerned about a talent drain in some ways. But at the same time, you have to look at it in the overall context of the talent can go one way, it can go the other, it can go sideways, and it just gives more opportunities to players.
Totally agree with you. This was kind of one of those things where, like, hey, well, there's a topic we want to talk about, but we're not really sure what we want to say. And I appreciate your thoughts, Steve. I like where this went. I'm really anxious to see what's going to happen in the next couple years. It's not going to happen, overnight. But I think in the next couple years, as we move more to that Power 2 and that other 8, I think you're going to see this more often than not. And I think you're going to see these kids realize, these student athletes realize that their opportunities, what a Power 2 conference would deem them to be second tier or backups, their opportunities really are at that 08 level. And I think it honestly improves the play at the other 8 level. So, hey, we thank you for tuning in here. We have a lot more to do here. I know the off season is close to upon us, but we're going to keep on everything college football. That is our focus. Big Ten for Steve, Mountain West for JY. And with that, we'll see you next time on the Big Mountain.